Dreamer, we'll start with you, please.
I am Lori Chavez Dreamer, 54 years old, and excited to be here. Thank you again for having us. I am the Republican candidate for Congressional District 5, and the district runs really from the base of the Selwood Bridge, parts of Multnomah County, inclusive of parts of Clackamas, Marion, Lynn County, and heads over to Deschutes, the new part of the district. So,
how far in Multnomah County? What?
You know, it kind of runs Selwood Bridge, southeast Portland area, and then it starts in Lake Oswego.
To the east side, Woodstock, okay.
Lake Oswego.
So Reed College isn't Lake Oswego?
No, just outside of that.
Lewis and Clark is in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did you get to where you are today?
So I've lived in, my husband and I chose to live in Oregon 22 years ago. We moved here Labor Day of 2000. My husband and I both grew up in Central Valley of California, Hanford, small farm community. We met in high school, 14 years old, high school sweethearts. After college, we were married. So we were married 31 years. We raised two beautiful girls, 28-year-old twins. That grew up, well, we moved here when they were 6 years old, so we've lived in Happy Valley the entire time. My husband took a job after finishing medical school at Kaiser Hospital, and we started our life there. Small community of 4,000, and now, approaching 30,000. So, yes, that's where we started, and at the same time, we built a business starting in 2005 in the healthcare industry. So for the last 18 years, where we do anesthesia management, and now we've added health and wellness.
What is anesthesia management? Does that mean you have a bunch of anesthesiologists, or are they nurse anesthesiologists, or what?
Both. We have a hybrid model for that. So yes, we have contracts with surgery centers, hospitals, GI clinics up and down the Pacific Northwest, Washington, and Oregon.
How many people do you have?
Oh gosh. I don't quote me on an exact number. It's over 150 with all the business staff and billing and everything. Probably closer to 200.
And it's headquartered in Happy
in
Valley?
Clackamas.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, you have a business that employs anesthesiologists
And nurse anesthetists.
and you contract with hospitals?
Yes, hospitals. Yeah, anesthesia is one of the few practices that it's really a contract. We're the management company. So we hire the CRNAs and MDs, and then we go out for proposals for those different surgery locations and bid the proposals if they want 4 operating rooms.
So I would assume there are Portland area hospitals who use your anesthesiologists?
Yes. So Providence, contracted with Providence. We've contracted with, but we have surgery centers, we have GI clinics all up and down Oregon.
Are you running the company, your husband, both of you?
My husband is the president and CEO of the company. We started it together, him and I, and one other partner and his wife in 2005. So I was the business side, the front office. Now we've grown that over time, so we have a full in-house staff, business coordinators, billing companies, credentialing companies, HR, in-house recruitment now. So yes, we've built that over time, and we added health and wellness.
And is your husband an anesthesiologist?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So you were mayor of Happy Valley until 2018?
Correct. So I served city council from 2004 to 2010, and then mayor 2010 to 2018.
And what have you, since 2018, what kind of civic engagement have you had?
Oh gosh. Well, we went back to running the business. I think you're aware that I ran for the State House in 16 and 18. So after that, took back to the business. So when we opened the health and wellness clinics, right about that time, 18, 19, well, maybe not quite 18. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly because it's been about 3 years. So we're getting ready to increase over. So I became the business coordinator for the health and wellness and aesthetics clinics. And we have now 3 health and wellness clinics, Bend, Clackamas, and now Las Vegas, and then we have aesthetics clinics in Clackamas and Vancouver.
Is that alternative medicine, or what is it?
So what we're primarily serving, we were doing biologic therapy for a lot of patients, IV hydration, and it really morphed into serving primarily now almost 100% Spravato patients, so drug-resistant depression.
Spravato?
Yeah, it's a form of ketamine. It's a drug we use often in the operating room, ketamine, but now it's in a nasal application. It's called Spravato. It got a J-code just a few years ago, and so what we have
that's a Medicare billing code?
A Medicare billing code, sorry about that. And so we now serve drug-resistant depression patients. So patients who maybe have been on 2 or 3 different types, alternative drug regimens, and it has not been helpful to their care, they come and see us.
And it's obviously prescription.
Absolutely, under the care of either their psychiatrist or psychologist, they come before us and we monitor and manage those patients.
Your company, you and your husband and your partner's company is C Corp?
We're a LLC.
Registered in Oregon?
Yes. Yeah. Evolve Health and Wellness, under Evolve, and Anesthesia Associates Northwest.
Does Spravato have any application to substance abuse disorder?
No, we're not. Why they're suffering from depression is not. We don't have access to why. They're just referred in. We're treating the depression.
So you won't be in the Measure 110 flow.
Well, we're looking into a naturopath to start to work through that process. But at this point, this is the codes that we have and that we see. We serve other types of patients as well. Patients with that are on biologic therapy. So rheumatoid arthritis, MS, patients who come in for drug therapy with those as well.
Okay. Why are you running for this office?
Well, for as you know, 22 years we've been invested here, and I really got started on the Parks Committee and then City Council. I wanted to make sure that we were paying attention to, as we grew our business, raised my girls, that I was involved heavily in the community. So, and that hasn't changed. I mean, I've sat on numerous boards and committees, and as mayor, lobbied at the state, lobbied at the federal level for small communities and what they're concerned with, and it really doesn't feel like it's gotten much better over time with the one party voice. And I want to make sure that we have more of a round table of more diversity and listening to everybody at the table. And I find that in the state of Oregon that hasn't happened. And I want to make sure that we can carry Oregon's voice to the federal level and fight for all those things that were important to me as mayor and to the community members, small business owners, families, and so forth.
Good. Great. We'll get into some more specifics in a minute, but let's give your opponent a chance to introduce herself.
Jamie McLeod Skinner, live in Central Oregon, just outside Terrebonne. In one of the points,
Your affiliation, party affiliation.
thank you. Democrat, I'm a rural Democrat, but also the nominee of the Democratic Party of Oregon, the Independent Party of Oregon, Working Families Party of Oregon as well for this race. And just one other point, Lori described the northern boundary. The district goes down. It's not inclusive of all of Deschutes County. Goes down to Sun River, just to give a sense of that geography.
So tell us a little bit. Give us your condensed biography.
Yeah, background. I was actually born in the Midwest. My mom, she was left a violent marriage when she was young, so was raising 2 kids on her own, pretty much hand to mouth. She was working 3 jobs, put food on the table, and she took a teaching job in Tanzania when I was a kid. When I was 9, and so met my dad there. The guy I called my dad was over in East Africa for a handful of years before returning to the States, moving to Southern Oregon. So I'm a graduate of high school in Southern Oregon. Actually began my first year of college at Lewis and Clark, which is in the district. Was focused then on more kind of cultural anthropology, but decided to follow my dad's footsteps and go into engineering. So I actually studied a little bit of ag engineering before finishing up my undergraduate degree in civil engineering. Went on, got a master's in city and regional planning, both from East Coast schools. Began my public service over in Bosnia and Kosovo just after the war ended. Dayton Accords had just been signed. I came out as a young adult, as I say, in rural areas. That's how God made me. God doesn't make mistakes. And so, but could not serve in the military. So worked for a humanitarian organization, the International Rescue Committee. Was managing the reconstruction of schools and hospitals in Bosnia. Then they asked me to help with their startup in Kosovo. I was working in rural villages, designing water and sanitation systems as well. When I wanted to come back to the States.
How long were you there?
It was about a year and a half total. The stints are typically 6 months or 12 months max. And they asked me to run their refugee resettlement office in the Bay Area. So moved to San Jose, worked on refugee resettlement and with refugee and immigrant communities for a couple of years before getting into local government, working as a city planner, and then also was encouraged to run for local office, served on the Santa Clara City Council for 2 terms. They have term limits. But during that,
What years, I know it's in your bio, but what years were those?
2004 to 2012. And, made a name for myself in terms of just careful fiscal management and then also ethics. It was during the time the 49ers came in and wanted to build a publicly funded stadium, and I pushed to make sure it was the best deal possible for the city, but had a lot of people who would come up to me privately and thank me for being able to stand up on issues. I had a lot of Republicans then who were supporting me because they said that I was the only one on the council they trusted in terms of just the integrity and ethics I brought to the role. But during that time, the full-time work also included working as a city planner and then as a environmental planner for a regional water agency that served about 2 million people, urban and rural areas, 15 cities. When I termed out of office, I wanted to come back home. My mom had stayed in Southern Oregon, and then in '99 moved to Central Oregon. My sister's there, aunt and uncle, so our family stayed in Oregon. Went to law school at the U of O, focused on water law and Indian law, so natural resources. Met my wife there. I'm a stepmom of 4. We were in Southern Oregon for a bit, and then in Central Oregon.
Did you practice law?
I'm a member of the bar, and I have worked on some land use issues, but so I've got a small business. It's a consultancy, and there's kind of 2 branches to it. There's kind of a legal piece and then more of a non-legal piece. And the non-legal piece, I'm doing some of that now with, but it's pro bono, just because I'm running to kind of keep things really clean. It's an affordable housing project. Last year, in Talent, so a third of the homes and businesses burned down in Talent as part of the 2020 fires. Yep. And so they had a lot of their staff leaving, and they were really in dire straits, so they asked me to come in and help kind of right the ship. And so I was there from January to June and got the team built, got a bunch of resources in, began the rebuilding process, got their permitting, everything sorted out before going back home. So it was something I've done in just the past year.
We saw you a couple years ago running as candidate for Secretary of State. You're running now for this office. Those are 2 pretty different functions. Why are you just looking for a job, or what?
No, I actually, right now, one of my other roles is with the state, helping in emergency preparedness, working for OHA as part of the CERT program. It's Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon. I asked them if I could scale down while I was running. They wanted to bring me in actually full-time. That, being engaged in public service, but also in local government, in making sure that our systems are functioning well and running well is something that is important to me, and so that's a commitment that I've had. I've 2 other roles I currently have is serving on an education service district board in Jefferson County. It's a very politically diverse board, and then also was appointed a couple years ago by the governor to serve on OWEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. So it's a statewide role.
So what is it about this CD5 opportunity that drew you? What part of serving in Congress is? Well,
I have been interested in what happens at the congressional level. Actually, in 2018, I ran in the old CD2 when the lines were drawn, and actually had the largest voter swing of any congressional race in the country that year, talking about the same issue I'm talking about now, about healthcare, affordable prescription drugs, some of the climate issues that we hadn't yet seen the crisis, but we knew was coming. It was still more some of the conversations, but the drought was already there. It's a big issue in Central Oregon. And then also just some of some of the other issues around ethical governance. I mean, we saw after 2016 a lot of fear. We saw then in this last presidential election, the January 6th, the pushing back and that was some of the writing that we saw on the wall. That was we were talking about the Secretary of State role. Those threats were there, and now we've seen them come to fruition. And so folks who deny elections, deny the results of elections, it's a crisis level that it brings us to. And I have literally worked in former war zones. I've lived in places that were former war zones, and I never thought it could happen here, but the threats that are before us, and even with this cycle and election, are very real. And I think because a lot of Americans haven't seen that or experienced that, there's not that awareness of the level of crisis and the level of threat that's there.
Good.
I want to get a clearer sense of you two within your party. So let me start with you, Mayor. Can you point to someone in Congress now who you say, by virtue of style and substance, that's the kind of congressperson I want to be? And I'm going to ask Jamie the same question.
Well, I can tell you I've gotten to know quite a few of the congressmen and women. Congressman Walden has been instrumental in telling me and teaching me along the way. But there's one other congressman who's kind of stood out that I didn't know ahead of time. So to be more pragmatic and thoughtful about somebody I would look to. And that's Congressman Randy Feenstra from the state of Iowa. I know it seems odd, but when you meet people along the way that you kind of are attracted to for the reasons on how they approach issues, and I've kind of sat through some of his stuff and listened to how he approaches his issues. Maybe they're not the exact same from Oregon and Iowa, but it's really more of that Main Street approach. In how do we identify what the issues are and how do we get things done, and it's kind of a style I've used as mayor. You can't just come in already knowing all the ideas and all the answers. So there's a few people I've been drawn to.
But among other things, are you a Republican who believes that Joe Biden was duly elected, or are you a Republican who believes that?
No, Joe Biden was elected. Our president was elected.
So you're in a narrow minority of Republicans in office right now.
Oh, well, I will tell you, I'm a Lori Republican, that being said.
I'm sorry, what, a Lori?
A Lori Republican, because, we all come to, when I grew up, I was a Democrat, right? As a young girl. My dad was a Teamster, union worker. My parents were hardworking. My grandmother is Hispanic. We were Democrats. It was different then. And it's not the same as it is today. And as we've built our business and really looked at the reality, it's about common sense approach. So, you'll never see me on the extremes. I'm not extreme. Main Street approach, identify the issues that are best for all Happy Valleyites, Happy Valleyans, Oregonians, and Americans.
Can you just take a minute? What was your signature accomplishment as mayor of Happy Valley?
Oh my gosh, well, the one I always brag about and love to talk about is the Happy Valley Youth Council. In 2010, I thought it was important as a growing community to identify maybe some of the issues in a bedroom community when kids wanted a voice. And so we got together with some of the staff members to say, how do we bring this forward, the voice of the youth in Happy Valley in a growing community? And we did a project called the Photo Voice, because they were complaining about there's not enough parks or there's not enough things to do on the weekends. We wanted to keep kids engaged. And so I said, bring us some projects of things you don't like and things you do like through a picture, and then let's come up with those solutions. So we created the Happy Valley Youth Council, and they weren't really a parallel government voice, but they were giving us the input. And my charge to them was, everybody is from somewhere and very proud of it. You kids are from Happy Valley. I want you to identify if you could go off and live, become an adult, live your life. And if you were to come back to Happy Valley, what do you want it to look like? And what would you want to raise your family like? And then I want you to start now on bringing that to fruition. So that was my biggest accomplishment.
So I want to ask you the same question, but before I do it, is Kurt Schrader helping your campaign?
No. I've talked to Kurt Schrader.
I've been told that he is. Have you been told?
I'm not gonna.
You've been told you don't want to share?
Who told you?
I've been told by several people.
That Kurt Schrader's helping my campaign? I've talked to Kurt Schrader one time, and it was about 2 weeks ago in the airport coming back from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And he hadn't seen me in however many months, so whoever made that up, that's not true.
I am working to address the issues in our district.
Okay. So, same question for you. Point to someone in Congress. Are you going to be like Bernie Sanders? Are you going to be like Earl Blumenauer? Not that those are the two polar opposites, but
no,
pretty close.
The person actually I will point to, and I have to do an admission on this, because if I get elected, I will only be my wife's second favorite member of Congress. She's made that very clear already. Lauren Underwood is her favorite member of Congress, because it's someone who just focuses on getting the job done, also has a very diverse district. There's folks I really admire in Congress. I admire Sherry Bustos, who's supporting me, who has, I know she's not running again, so would not have the privilege of working with her, but she did similar things to what I was able to, at least in part of the 4 years ago, is that she was able to win over folks who had voted for Trump, who felt frustrated, but were also that showing up, that making connections with people across the political divide. There's also folks like in more urban settings, someone like Katie Porter is outspoken.
Yep.
She's also focused on getting things done.
Okay.
But I think all three of those are a great example of folks I really admire.
An unfair question. People who have worked with you, who talk to us, who love your politics, say that you have the tendency to be self-righteous, uncooperative, and even occasionally a bully. Any truth to that?
I don't think so. I mean, I've got people who've worked with me for years because they are really passionate about the things I'm passionate about, and they also are really concerned about us not getting things done. And people who are hurting need a response to get things done. So I work closely with folks I know in talent. When I was working there, the staff wanted me to stay. They gave me this award when I left. They were asking me to apply for the long-term position because they wanted me to stay on. That was my most recent experience in terms of that 24/7, and I mean that's a response from folks there, including the chief of police who wanted me to stay.
So, different question, totally different. So, President Biden has moved forward with a plan to forgive a certain amount of college debt. Are you familiar with that policy?
I am.
On your disclosure form, it appears that either you or your wife or both still have significant college debt. Will you benefit from that?
I actually have to. I don't know for myself. And she's actually in a loan forgiveness program. She's working in public service. So if it is something that kicks in automatically, then it may. But it's actually, when I heard, I actually asked her about it. I haven't had a chance to look into the details on it.
Okay.
I'm not sure in terms of our overall earnings. I know they're making adjustments now. If we would qualify or not.
Okay, so let's separate your personal situation from the policy. How did you feel about what the president announced? Do you agree with his desire to forgive student debt? And if so, did he do enough? Is he proposing enough?
So there's a couple things. One is that Congress holds the purse strings. So I think that should have been a discussion made with Congress. I think that what he was, I think the situation that we're in right now is really working to get people to lean into trying to address the economic struggles that families are in. I know the things that were available to me when I went to college are not available to college students today, my own kids including, or those who are eligible or of that age. So trying to help people to engage in the economy and get back to work and get our economy going again. I think there's a lot of drivers, a lot of things that have been a lot of steps that Democrats have taken. I think that they are important steps. In the long run, we need to address and fix some of the challenges with our education system. So I've proposed this civilian GI Bill that is something that could be the equivalent of a promissory note, that if you wanted to go and study something like nursing, and we're going to have a shortage of nurses coming up, that you could sign up, you could go to college and get the living expenses covered debt-free. And then as you, when you finished up, you would then work in the fields and work in that profession for a certain amount of years. That would be the policy discussion that was being decided, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, whatever. And then so you could go through, you'd then be employed, so you'd be doing that as a job, but we could then get people in the profession that would otherwise not engage in the profession. So that's the long-term solution I think we need to get to. Specific to this, I think there was something that needed to be done. So I would have haggled out some of the policy differences, and again, I think they're making some of those adjustments now. But I do think that there was providing some relief to address the pressure point that people were feeling to get people to re-engage. I think something needed to happen. So I think it should have been Congress. I would have supported some measure and some step moving forward, but I would have. There were tweaks that I would like to have seen to the bill that. Well, it wasn't a bill. It was a step he took.
Okay. Same question for you, Mayor Dermer. Do you support the idea of student debt forgiveness?
I didn't support this executive spending because it didn't go through Congress. There was no conversation. Again, my husband and I, when we moved here, we were $380,000 in debt from medical school, raising a family, trying to survive, and it wasn't without sacrifice and hard work of 100-hour weeks to pay off that debt. I have my daughter who just finished law school. She took out $60,000 in loans, and she's going to benefit from this. I find that's an unfortunate because she's going to make a fine living with her and her husband, who's also a lawyer who didn't have debt, and I will highly encourage her not to accept it because I think it's her investment in her education to do so. Again, there was no discussion or any negotiations. There could have been a myriad of other things that I think could have been addressed. But if we don't rein in the reckless spending, another $400 billion on top of massive amounts of spending bills, I worry for Oregon. We're a small population compared to, and we're $31 trillion heading toward massive debt, and I'm concerned with that. So I'd rather see some public-private investments that we've seen through community colleges, where we can incentivize our students to get to work the moment they can get out. Maybe we could have talked about the finance rate, and not so high. Maybe we could have spread it out over time, those payments where they had an opportunity to pay back, but there was none of that conversation. So again, I couch this as not thoughtful and thinking it through, and now we're trying to, backpedal and try to figure out how it really works. So it's a concern for more spending.
So you advise your daughter not to accept the benefit?
Yeah, I've told her this is her education, and I truly hope that she heeds my advice on this. This is her education.
So I want to ask you, in your financial disclosure, you disclosed that you and your husband took a draw from the anesthesiology company of over $1 million in 2020 and in 2021.
A draw?
Well, it says on this document.
Oh, you're talking about draws that we take every month? Is that what you're talking about?
It says annual draw from income from current filing year, and it says income from
the profits from the company. We take it as draws.
$1 million
to W-2s.
Somewhere between $1 million and $5 million in 2020 and in 2021. But you also the company took $1.3 million in PPP loans, which were forgiven.
That's right.
So your businesses were profitable enough for you and your husband to take more than $1 million out each of those 2 years, but you also accepted PPP lending.
Right. So for 150 families and more that we employ at the height of the pandemic, we're trying to keep these employees on the front lines in the hospitals and the surgery centers and so forth. Because when we came back online, which was about 6 to 8 weeks after the height of the pandemic to come back into the healthcare, we needed to keep them on payroll to do so. So yes, we applied for the payroll protection plan in order to keep them employed until they can come back online.
Well, but you've said that you would advise your daughter not to accept
in her education.
Yeah, which is in essence a government bailout.
Yeah, a job. She has a job to cover.
So you took a government bailout, but your daughter
Well, our
shouldn't?
employees needed that money. We don't have the access to that cash to pay those employees. These are highly paid, compensated employees where they're making anywhere between, I'm not sure exactly. Every contract's different for each one, but I would say anywhere from $230,000 to $300,000 a year that cannot be covered for the amount of employees that we had. And in order to keep them employed and not have them move and uproot their families to go somewhere else when there was no jobs and we had no other options because the government mandated that we close down, it's different than this when she can go out and work.
But you've been consistently critical. You've been a fiscal conservative throughout your career. You've been critical of federal spending. You were critical when the Biden bailouts came through for Oregonians. But your financial statement shows that you and your husband have been very successful. You've got a net worth in excess of $10 million. And yet you took this bailout. So isn't that somewhat hypocritical for you to criticize bailouts for college students or bailouts for regular Oregonians, but to take a bailout yourself when you're already wealthy?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's completely different when there's no choice, right? The government mandated we could not work. We could not employ our families. We could not cover that in our business. Paying people not to work is not a good plan, in my opinion, when they can go to work and have that choice. We were not offered that choice when it first came out, and we needed to make sure that we did not lose those employees during the height and pack up and move somewhere else. That's what we were concerned with, and we would not have been able to cover that.
Okay. If you could both talk about what your, as a junior congressperson, of course, you won't choose your committees, nor will you choose what areas you get to work in, but if you could work on one thing that you think would be of benefit to the 5th District when you first got to DC, what would that issue be, or the committee area that you would like to work on be? Start with you, James.
And you're going to force us to choose just one?
Just one.
Because that's, so let me make a comment, then I'll pivot to one that I think is due. But climate issues and wildfire impacts and drought are huge issues in the district. But in terms of one that I think now the stage has been set through the Inflation Reduction Act is to really go after prescription drug prices. That's something Democrats have worked on for years, and now it was limited, so it was just Medicare recipients and insulin, but it started that process. Part of the challenges we're seeing right now around the economy is we need to drive down housing costs and then also, help people get back to work and help the economy get back on. So I think that is one example of something we can do. And having even said that, and having you said just one thing, I'm now going to run on and
No, we're going to stop. We're going to stop you.
Okay.
Mayor Drimmer, one issue or area that you would want to work on first.
Well, I want to focus on this public safety that we're seeing across the country and the demise of supporting our law enforcement and law and order in this country. As mayor, it was a focus often to support public safety through and through. People expect to be safe. It's a contract with our leadership when we collect public safety dollars to do just that, and we haven't seen that.
So what's Congress's role in public safety as it relates to the communities within the 5th District?
A couple of things that I think we want to focus on is making sure that we can start to build back up our law enforcement and incentivize money right to the states and into these cities in order to hire more law enforcement and elevate them to be part of the community.
So when Clinton was president, he famously hired, or at least moved to hire 100,000 police officers. Do you remember that?
I don't really recall that now.
Okay. What do you think the connection is between police officers and public safety?
Well, I think community safety, and they're part of the community. Just like our firefighters, they're our neighbors. There are our kids' parents. We see them, and we want to make sure that the community feels safe and protected. And what we're seeing today on the streets isn't that. People are feeling like they call 911 and nobody's answering. And that's a real concern when people are going to school, going to work, on the road. They're not sure what's going to happen, and people are wanting to stay home. And I think that we should have a level of expectation that our community should be safe.
And you believe that there's a federal role in the funding of local police?
I think that there can be a federal role. I do think that we can get it.
Where's the fiscal conservative in you? I mean, it strikes me that that's ought to be a local responsibility.
Well, a local responsibility, but it doesn't feel like it's being done. And I think that we have to decide, how do we support law enforcement as a whole across the country? It's one of the #1 priorities that we're seeing. And we have to prioritize. It isn't about more necessarily reckless spending. We have to prioritize. And this is the one thing, whether you're Democrat or Republican, a business owner
If I was a
or a
fiscal
child.
conservative as a Republican and I wanted more police, I'd run for the city of Portland. I wouldn't run for Congress. That's not an appropriate role, right? Particularly if you're a Republican.
Well, I think it's important to address the priorities of the district, and as mayor, that is something that we did. And I think it has to be done because it's not being done here locally. We're also not making sure that
So
our
do you
prosecutors
think
are.
If teachers weren't getting paid enough, there's an appropriate role in Congress to give teachers raises?
Well, my daughter was a teacher for 5 years, and I don't think teachers get paid enough, I can tell you that.
So do you think there's a federal role? in
Well,
teachers?
the Department of Education should be focused on that, and I would like that money to flow right to the states. Push that money directly to the states and or to these cities to handle those issues, because it gets lost in the bureaucracy and lost in the dollars, and I think that that's something that Congress could do.
I have a different question, but it's really one. Are we closing in here?
Good, go ahead. You got time.
I want you to both let your hair down a little bit, figuratively. It's pretty hard to spend. Any halfway intelligent person would spend time with both of you and realize you're both smart, committed, and while you view the world differently, you both have the interest of the state at heart. So my question is, I made the mistake of watching TV at night, and I watched these independent expenditures campaigns against each of you, and I have to go take a shower, and it makes me feel like the state is further divided. Now, you can tell me all you want that it's an independent expenditure campaign and you have nothing to do with it. We know that that's not true, but aside from that, how does that make you feel that you're participating in a process in which you are each painting each other as Satan? They're the ugliest commercials I see on TV right now. I mean, can that possibly make you feel like you're furthering the cause of civil discourse?
I can tell, I mean, this, you just discounted, but I can, so we actually don't have a TV at home, and I can tell you the commercials that we
Smart.
made and the commercials that I've approved that have my name on them. And one talked about the values that I want to bring
I'm
to.
talking about the independent expenditure campaigns, which we all know, if you didn't want to have happen, you put it in the red box, the black box, whatever it is, and you'd communicate, please don't get this nasty. But, so, good for you, you don't have to watch these things. I do. And I'm not blaming one of you more than the other. I'm just saying, you're part of this process that I would argue, no matter who wins, ain't helping. And I'm just wondering how that makes you feel, given that I do believe you both have the interests of the state at heart. And you both realize that at some point, you're going to have to reach over to the other side.
Yeah, I think reaching over to the other side is important, and I have experience in doing that. We're not going to sit here and tell you, if you've watched politics long enough, you do know that there's the independent expenditures out there and how much it costs to run these campaigns. And if you sit back and do nothing, so that's why these are important, right? Getting out to the public, making sure that we can talk to the journalists, making sure that, I don't know if I align with Willamette Week's values all the time, but I think it's important to come here. I think it's important to talk to people. That's why it's important to get out on the trail and shake hands and
So with all
listen
due
to
respect, you're not
everybody.
addressing my question. What
No,
I'm
I
telling
am.
you is
That's
the
my
ads
point.
are unbelievably ugly.
Yeah.
And even though they're independent expenditures, I'm blaming each of you for participating. And I'm wondering, do you feel any responsibility for how this debate has become so ugly?
Yeah, the
And
country
my guess is
is
that the
divided.
consequence, which may be the intent of the independent expenditure campaigns, is it may turn away votes. Because who would want to vote for either of you if all I knew about you was what I'm seeing in these two attack ads? Okay, that was a worthless waste of time, because
No,
neither of you answered my question. So Nigel, go ahead.
I guess I will Google and look at what's out there.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do not know what's out there, because I know there's some of the stuff that's been aimed at me, and it's
You're both
it's
war
dis-
criminals, basically. Both of you should be, on trial, based on what I see on TV.
Okay, let's see if we can
Just
let's see if we can go to a more
No,
productive
but wait a minute,
question.
let me just say that having actually worked in a country where there were war criminals, having sat down with a family who had to identify their kid in a mass grave,
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the colorful language used, but also I will just say I know refugee
Maybe I'm too
families.
sensitive to these commercials, maybe they're not that hard.
Yeah, let's move on from this issue. So one of the things that we always look for in candidates is independence. As Mark has just pointed out, this is a brutally partisan race because it's so close, obviously. And yet, when one of you is going to win and one of you is going to represent a very evenly divided district. So you're going to have to serve constituents who are almost half of people who didn't support you. So tell us something in your history, in your background, that demonstrates that you are an independent person who, in your case, Jamie, doesn't just do the Democratic Party line, or in your case, Mayor, doesn't just toe the Republican Party line. We'll start with you. Where's an example in your history of you acting independent of your fellow Republicans?
Yeah, thank you again. I think I've answered this before exactly here, because I think it's an important issue. And when we're talking about abortion, right, we're going to have this conversation over and over again, and it might be part of the commercials that you've seen. And they're, racking me with anti-woman. I am a woman. I've had two beautiful girls. This is an important issue. And the labels is what gets us in trouble. And I think the last time I was here, I think you have it on record as pro-choice, right? And then, and I just laugh about these labels because they want to pigeonhole, and this is such a nuanced conversation amongst all Oregonians. And my position has never changed. Women want access to abortion most Americans up until the first trimester. And they always want to be protected in the case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And that's where most of Americans are. And that is where I am.
And just to be 100% crystal clear,
Yes.
you would say that you are a pro-choice candidate.
No, now see this is my point. The labels are terrible because I'm not, in the primary, I wasn't pro-life enough for my party, and they knew that, and I would never lie to them about that.
Okay.
And now in the general, I'm not pro-choice enough because I don't fit. If I don't vote for the extreme policies, then how can I ever say that? So now I'm no labels. I'm just the same person.
You are supportive of abortions in the first trimester.
Yes.
Okay. And you are supportive of abortions in case of rape, incest, or medical emergency.
Always.
Okay. All right. That's
no labels because they don't fit.
Okay. That is very helpful.
Can I just do a follow-up ask on that? Because Lori, just a couple months ago, you stated very publicly, one, you celebrated the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is essentially the position you're talking about right now. And the second thing is you made very clear that you would vote for, I think you made a statement to the Statements Journal, you on social media, you made very clear that you would support a ban on abortion after 6 weeks. And that's before most women know they're pregnant. So you have clearly stated just a couple months ago that was your position. That's not consistent with what you're saying now.
So Roe v. Wade, I think is exactly where it needs to be back in the States. I never want to see this on the floor of Congress. It shouldn't have been there in the first place, ever, right? And Oregonians will now decide. And unless you know or I know something different, right now it is codified in law that a woman can have an abortion up until the last minute, fully taxpayer funded, no parental consent. We have the most extreme laws in the country. That is clearly protected here in Oregon, and now Oregonians will have a choice in the future if that ever wants to change. I don't ever see it changing, but they now have an option. In that, I don't remember exactly what the tweet was, and it says, I think it was like a heartbeat bill. There's also been conversation on the pain bill. There's also been conversation on the 24-week bill, and the reason that people ask this question is because they want some sort of common sense restrictions. Now, the Dobbs case came down. I hope it stays at states' rights. I believe in states' rights, and this is not a constitutional protection, and that's
Can you
why.
address the seeming discrepancy between, you said you support first trimester, and she said what?
6 weeks.
Is there?
In May, you were very clear. You said you would support a bit, and then you said you're always on the side of life. You will always support the.
I personally, I love life. Always to be on the side of life. I would like us to never have this option for women.
Well, what about
But my thought is, it's because it's extreme. People are not understanding you support up until the very last day. You support fully taxpayer funded. I'm sorry I cannot get to that point, and I'll never get to that point.
I'm just trying to reconcile.
Yeah.
Your opponent is accusing you of taking two different positions.
Right.
Can you just clarify that?
So my position is, exactly as it's always been, my personal position is, I support a woman's access in the first trimester. I support a woman's access in case of rape, incest, the life of the mother always. Never criminalize a woman for this choice, ever. And I wouldn't support a national ban. I don't want to see us on the floor of Congress.
All right, let's move on to your example of how you have shown independence from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, and there's all sorts of here at the states, but also at the state level, but also in terms of national issues. So some of the national issues, banning members of Congress from trading stocks, that's a bipartisan, potential for a bipartisan bill. The prescription drug prices, within lowering those, some Democrats are there, some Democrats are not there. I have pushed back on the fact that I don't take corporate PAC money is separate from where a lot of Democrats are at. If you look at those who are at the state level, when we were having the conversation of Secretary of State, I did not get the support of the institutions with my party because I was seen as being independent-minded. And so having those stances...
What was one of the positions you think that cost you that support?
I think when you look at the urban-rural divide within our state, that there is a bias towards urban areas and urban candidates, frankly. And being someone who is in Central Oregon, who's worked very closely with folks across the political divide. The ESD I serve in, it's not a majority of Democrats, but we work together well on issues, on local issues. But it's because of the focus we bring to trying to get politics out of it, focus on taking care of our kids.
So, forgive me, but I think most of what you have just said would put you to the left of the middle of your party. What we're talking about really, if you were to be elected, is that you're going to have to work with a lot of Republicans in the 5th District and in DC. So can you give us an example of where you have worked? I take your point that you serve on the ESD in Jefferson County, which is a red area, but give us a specific issue on which you have differed from Democrats. Where you've crossed the aisle to work with Republicans on an issue or championed an issue that is normally seen as a Republican issue.
There are a lot of, my work on OWEB, when I work closely with folks in ag and ranchers, on some of those different issues, we're looking at how we can help our natural resources, but also support our local economies. Some of the forestry management practices we have, making sure we're having systems in place that help to protect the resources, but also utilize some of the past practices. It gets off of some of the more traditional measures that have gone forward at the state level. I mean, last year, but a lot of these are bipartisan issues. Last year, the guy who helped trigger the Malheur occupation first went down because of the water crisis, drought crisis. First went down to Klamath and tried to stir things up there. When that didn't work, he then came to Central Oregon to try to stir things up in Central Oregon. And several of us worked behind the scenes, including Republican and Democratic county commissioners, trying to dampen down and not have that explode into another political extravaganza. I mean, he brought people in from the former Trump administration. We had a meeting, it was back in August, and this was before the lines were drawn. I had no thought that this race was coming up, or it was just something I was working on. People reached out to me and asked me to help with. And we went into that room, and there was supposed to be 50 people, 500 people showed up. And it was a political tinderbox. And there was several key people who had done the work to make sure that was not going to use the crisis of the drought to explode into a politically divisive setting. And I literally had someone come up to me at that, and we looked around, there's probably a handful, you can count on one hand the Democrats that were in that room. And I was sitting next to a farmer I know from the Madras area, right at a table in the middle, and this guy comes up, all he had Trump written on every single thing. And he comes up and he looks at me. He was going to talk to the guy sitting next to me. He looks at me and he says, "Is that our favorite Democrat?" And I have support of Republicans throughout the San Diego Canyon because I understand wildfire issues, and I've actually done that work. I have folks, local elected officials in Central Oregon who essentially said, "Look, you understand our issues. You show up. You're one of us." So, maybe some of this work is done on the ground level, trying to find drought solutions so that the farmers and ranchers in Jefferson County, which have junior water rights, get access so that they don't lose their crop.
Okay.
So this is not a fight in Salem. These are the on-the-ground issues of trying to work and create solutions.
Great. All right. I'd like to ask you each to ask your opponent a question. Make it a question, not a statement. Make it something the opponent can answer. It would be ideal if it would be something that would illuminate something that you would like viewers and us to know about your opponent. Please don't ask another abortion question. I feel like we've given that enough time. Mayor, we'll ask you to ask your opponent a question first.
My question is, you stated today, and you stated several times, that you're not taking any corporate PAC dollars, but we know that there's outside money being spent. And so my question is, with that outside money, who receives corporate PAC dollars, how is that not part of your campaign?
The resources that I get and that I control as part of my campaign I actually just had a friend of mine I know from the Harvard Leadership Program I went through reach out to me just yesterday and ask if his corporate PAC could make a contribution. I said, no, I don't take corporate PAC money. We both have major parties behind us that are raising resources and spending resources in this race. To your question, to your comment before.
But you denounce it. You say you just won't have it. That is part of your platform.
The monies that I take and the monies that I spend on my campaign and that I control, do not involve corporate PAC money. They involve individual contribution in organizations like, labor organizations and pro-choice organizations and pro-environment organizations and pro-democracy organizations that contribute to my campaign. But they're membership-based organizations. That's who contributes to my campaign.
Question that you have for the mayor?
Well, two of the things that have come up that there have been a hard statement on before, there's actually been a lot of change and evolution of your of many of the points that you've raised and many of your policy
Put it in the form of a question.
I will, but it's like I'm filtering through. I think one clear distinction is there. We just had a shooting in Bend. There are gun safety issues. Is there one gun safety measure, common sense gun safety measure that you would support?
Well, there's a lot of gun safety measures that are already in law.
You're saying one additional one.
A new one, yes.
Is there
yeah.
something not?
I don't.
Yeah, because the shooter in Bend,
Right.
He was compliant.
Is there any additional gun control that you would support?
It's not even gun control. It's gun safety measures.
Sorry.
There's loopholes. There's all sorts of things right now that are
Yeah, I
happening.
just attended a visitation last night to Tri-County Gun Club to talk to gun owners about gun safety and how they're training law enforcement officers and how they're training our youth and making sure that we're educated on what gun safety is for law-abiding citizens and making sure that the laws on the books are already protected. What I know is that if you're not a law-abiding citizen, you don't follow any laws anyway. And I find that frustrating. There is so much violence on the street, and we want to continue to make laws that we're not enforcing. And so, again, I own weapons, right? When I purchase those, I have to fill out a 4773 to talk about domestic violence, and I have to make sure that I have no misdemeanors or no felonies in order to purchase that. We have laws that we have to enforce. So that's where I stand on that, and I want to make sure that we do protect law-abiding citizens on their Second Amendment.
So Measure 114, you're aware is on the ballot. It would require much more of a permitting process to purchase a gun, and it would limit high-capacity magazines to no more than 10. Where do you stand on that measure?
Yeah, I would like to incentivize and not mandate. I think that's the education process for Americans.
So you're a no on that?
I'm a no on 114.
Where are you on Measure 114?
I support it because there are steps we can take. But just going back to your point, Lori, you talked about background checks, but there are loopholes in background checks right now. And so even closing the loopholes is one of those things that gun safety, gun owners agree. There's some people who are purchasing guns who don't have those violent history checks. And so even just closing the loopholes, something you've already talked about, that's one of those common sense things that you're not even agreeing to.
Education and incentivizing and educating the public, not mandates.
Okay. All right, last question. If the world we're going to end tonight and you knew it, and you could only eat one thing, this is the question we're
Eat
asking.
one thing?
This is the question we're asking all candidates. So
One food.
One food. Or you said I have to have like a bottle of Jack Daniels before I go. So you can make that also. But we've asked every candidate so far this question: one food, one thing that you would like to consume before the world ends. We all end. Jamie, you first. What would that one thing be?
My favorite go-to is tom kha soup.
Tom kha soup. All right. And
With rice, just to clarify.
All right.
Very important clarification.
A ribeye steak.
Ribeye steak.
That's actually a very good choice. I want to say that on the road, soup.
Oh, look, we're coming together.
That's a really good choice. That's a really
We've
good
bridged the
choice.
divide.
I'll shake on that one. That's a really good choice.
All right. Well, thank you both for
Thank you
coming
both
in.
for coming in. Really
Thank
appreciate it. I
you.
know you're
Pleasure
busy.
to be here as always. Thank you. Thanks for
Good to see
having
you.
us.